When Kevin Thompson looked at his 12-year-old daughter Sophia and said 4 words that exposed his deepest fear, nobody in the Family Feud studio knew they were about to witness the most desperate hope ever shared on television. But it wasn't just what he said that stopped Steve Harvey cold, it was what happened next, when a little girl stood up and offered the ultimate sacrifice with the fierce determination of someone who refused to let her daddy die. The cameras kept rolling, but this wasn't entertainment anymore. This was the moment when love became literally a matter of life and death. Tuesday afternoon at the Family Feud studios in Atlanta began with the familiar energy of a game show taping. The Thompson family from Phoenix faced off against the Rodriguez family from Miami. But there was something about Kevin Thompson that immediately caught the production crew's attention. He moved carefully, deliberately, with the measured pace of someone whose body required constant management. Kevin Thompson, 45 years old, with graying hair and eyes that held both weariness and determination, stood at the family podium wearing a long-sleeved shirt that concealed the permanent catheter in his arm, the lifeline that connected him to the dialysis machine that kept him alive. Next to him, Sophia Thompson, 12 years old, with her father's eyes and a maturity that seemed impossible for her age, held his hand with the intensity of someone who understood that time with her daddy was precious in ways most children never have to consider. Completing the Thompson family were Kevin's wife Lisa, 43, a nurse whose professional composure couldn't quite mask the constant worry in her eyes, and Kevin's brother Michael, 47, who had taken time off from his job as a firefighter to support his brother through what they all hoped would be a day of joy rather than medical stress. What the studio audience couldn't see, couldn't know from Kevin's determined smile, was the battle he fought every single day just to stay alive. They couldn't know about the 4-hour dialysis sessions 3 times a week that left him exhausted for days. They couldn't know about the strict dietary restrictions, the medications that filled a tackle box, or the way he had learned to live life in 3-day increments between treatments. 3 years earlier, Kevin had been a healthy construction supervisor, coaching Sophia's soccer team, planning family vacations, living with the comfortable assumption that tomorrow was guaranteed. Then came the fatigue that wouldn't resolve, the swelling in his legs, the blood test that revealed kidney function dropping to critical levels. End-stage renal disease, the doctors had said. Genetic polycystic kidney disease that had remained dormant until his 40s, then progressed with devastating speed. The diagnosis had changed everything. Kevin had been placed on the transplant waiting list immediately, but with his blood type and medical complications, the wait could be years. In the meantime, dialysis had become his lifeline and his prison, keeping him alive while slowly draining his strength and freedom. The impact on Sophia had been devastating to watch. At 9 years old, she had suddenly found herself with a daddy who couldn't play catch, couldn't coach her team, couldn't promise to be at every school event because his schedule was dictated by a machine. She had learned to recognize the signs of fluid buildup, to help her mother monitor her father's diet, to understand that some days daddy felt good and other days he felt terrible. But Sophia had also learned something else, that love meant fighting, that families faced challenges together, and that sometimes little girls had to be braver than anyone should ever have to be. She had researched kidney disease on her school computer, learning about transplant procedures, compatibility testing, and the fact that living donors could give kidneys and continue to live normal lives. The conversation that had changed everything had happened 6 months earlier. Sophia had approached her parents with the kind of serious expression that meant she had been thinking about something important for a long time. "I want to give Daddy one of my kidneys," she had announced with the matter-of-fact certainty that only children possess. Lisa and Kevin had tried to explain that 12-year-olds couldn't be donors, that her kidneys were too small, that the surgery would be too dangerous. But Sophia had persisted with the logic that had always been her strength. "When I'm 18 then," she had said, "promise me that when I'm old enough, you'll let me save Daddy." The Family Feud opportunity had come through Michael, Kevin's brother, who had submitted their application with a simple note: "My brother is fighting for his life while trying to give his daughter a normal childhood. They both deserve a day of happiness." The producers had been moved by the family's story during the interview process, particularly by the obvious love that held them together despite impossible circumstances. The trip to Atlanta had been Kevin's first travel in over a year. The logistics had been complicated, requiring coordination with Phoenix dialysis centers and Atlanta medical facilities in case of emergency. But for 3 days, Kevin had allowed himself to feel something approaching normal, watching Sophia's excitement about being on television, feeling proud to be part of something positive instead of constantly managing medical crisis. During family introduction, Steve had approached them with his characteristic warmth, though something about Kevin's careful movements suggested health challenges that went beyond typical aging. "The Thompson family from Phoenix. Y'all ready to have some fun today?" Lisa stepped forward as the family spokesperson, her voice carrying the strength that comes from years of medical advocacy. "We're absolutely ready, Steve. This is my husband Kevin, our daughter Sophia, and Kevin's brother Michael." Steve approached Sophia with his usual warmth toward younger contestants. "Sophia, you excited to be here with your family?" Sophia nodded enthusiastically, but her eyes kept darting back to her father as if to make sure he was okay. "Yes, sir, Mr. Harvey. My dad's been looking forward to this for months." Something in the way she spoke about her father, with an intensity that suggested deep concern beneath her excitement, caught Steve's attention. He looked at Kevin, whose smile was genuine but whose posture suggested someone managing discomfort. "Kevin, you doing all right there, buddy?" Steve asked with the intuitive concern that had made him beloved by contestants for decades. Kevin nodded, his voice steady despite his circumstances. "I'm doing great, Steve. Just happy to be here with my family." The game progressed well through the first 4 rounds. The Thompson family was playing with remarkable teamwork, each member supporting the others with an intensity that went beyond typical competition. Sophia had buzzed in twice, giving answers that showed both intelligence and the kind of practical wisdom that comes from dealing with adult problems at a young age. During commercial breaks, production assistants noticed the family's careful attention to Kevin's needs. Lisa would check his fluid intake, ask about his energy level, monitor his color. Michael stayed close, ready to provide support if needed. And Sophia never strayed far from her father's side, as if proximity to him was both comfort and necessity. But it was during the 5th round that everything changed. The category that appeared on the board seemed straightforward. "Name something you're waiting for." Kevin had been selected to answer, his first time approaching the podium alone throughout the entire game. He walked forward with the careful deliberation of someone who had learned to conserve energy, but his determination was evident in every step. Steve read the question with his usual enthusiasm, unaware that he was about to witness something that would transform the entire studio. "Kevin, here we go. Name something you're waiting for." Kevin looked directly at Sophia, who was watching him with the kind of attention that children reserve for the most important moments. When he spoke, his voice was clear but carried a weight that seemed to encompass years of hope and fear. "A second chance at life." The studio fell quiet for a moment. The answer seemed poignant, but not unusual for a game show response. But something in Kevin's tone, in the way he looked at his family as he spoke, suggested deeper meaning. Steve paused, his entertainer's instinct sensing something profound beneath the surface. "A second chance at life. That's a powerful answer, Kevin." Kevin nodded, tears beginning to form in his eyes. "I've been on the kidney transplant waiting list for 3 years, Steve. Every day I'm waiting for a phone call that could give me my life back." The revelation hit the studio like a physical force. The audience, which moments before had been engaged in typical game show energy, now sat in stunned silence as they processed what they were hearing. But what happened next would change everything. Sophia, who had been watching from the family podium, suddenly stepped forward. With the fierce determination that had characterized her entire approach to her father's illness, she walked to where Kevin stood and wrapped her arms around his waist. "Daddy," she said, her 12-year-old voice carrying across the silent studio, "I want to give you my kidney when I'm old enough." The simplicity of the statement, delivered with absolute certainty by a child who had spent 3 years watching her father fight for his life, broke something open in everyone present. Steve Harvey, who had spent his career managing timing and maintaining energy, found himself completely off script. He looked at Kevin, who was now crying while holding Sophia, and understood that he was witnessing something far more important than entertainment. "Sophia," Steve said gently, walking closer to where father and daughter stood together. "Tell me what you mean, sweetheart." What happened next would transform the show entirely. Sophia looked up at Steve with eyes that seemed far older than 12 years. "My daddy is dying, Mr. Harvey. His kidneys don't work anymore, and he has to go to the hospital 3 times a week to get his blood cleaned by a machine. But I have 2 kidneys, and I only need 1. Her voice grew stronger as she continued, years of research and determination finding their voice. "The doctors say I can't donate until I'm 18, but when I'm old enough, I'm going to save my daddy, because that's what families do." The studio was completely silent now. Even the production crew had stopped their usual bustling activity, recognizing that they were witnessing something unprecedented. Kevin knelt down next to Sophia, his voice thick with emotion. Sophia has been asking about this for months, Steve. She's done research, talked to doctors, made up her mind. She's 12 years old, and she's planning to save my life. Behind the cameras, seasoned crew members were wiping their eyes. This wasn't just good television. This was a demonstration of love in its purest form, a child's determination to sacrifice for a parent who had given her everything. Steve looked at Lisa and Michael, whose faces showed the particular kind of awe that comes from witnessing extraordinary courage in someone so young. Kevin, Steve said softly, how does it feel to know that your daughter is willing to give you a part of herself? It's the most humbling thing I've ever experienced, Kevin replied, his arm around Sophia. But it's also terrifying. I don't want her to have to save me. I want a stranger's kidney, a deceased donor, anything that doesn't require my little girl to go through surgery. Sophia looked up at her father with the logic that had always been her strength. Daddy, you've given me everything my whole life. Let me give you something back. The profound love in that exchange, between a dying father and a daughter who refused to let him go, left everyone in the studio speechless. Steve Harvey, who had hosted thousands of shows and met countless families, found himself facing something he had never encountered. This wasn't just a family dealing with illness. This was a 12-year-old girl demonstrating what unconditional love looks like when it's tested by life and death circumstances. Stop the clocks, Steve called out, his voice carrying across the studio with unprecedented authority. Stop everything. The game show timers froze, the music cut out, the audience held its collective breath. Steve walked to the center of the stage, positioning himself so he could address the entire studio while staying close to Kevin and Sophia. Ladies and gentlemen, Steve began, his voice carrying a gravity that transformed the atmosphere. We just witnessed something extraordinary. We just saw what real heroism looks like when it comes from the heart of a child. He gestured toward Sophia. This 12-year-old girl right here has spent 3 years watching her father fight for his life, and instead of being afraid, instead of being angry, she's planning to save him. That's not just love. That's courage beyond anything most adults will ever demonstrate. The audience began to respond, but Steve wasn't finished. Kevin Thompson, Steve said, turning to face him directly, you are fighting the fight of your life, and you're doing it with dignity and grace. But Sophia, sweetheart, I need you to know something. What you're offering to do for your daddy, that makes you a hero already. Steve reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his personal business card. Kevin, this has my personal phone number on it. Because what we just witnessed here isn't just television. This is a family showing us what love looks like when it costs everything. But Steve wasn't done. He knelt down to Sophia's level, speaking directly to her with the respect her courage deserved. Sophia, he said, I want you to know that whether you end up being your daddy's donor or not, you've already given him the greatest gift possible. You've given him hope. You've given him a reason to keep fighting. You've shown him that love is stronger than anything. Steve began removing his suit jacket, the gesture that had become his signature in moments of profound connection. This jacket goes to both of you, Steve said, draping it around both Kevin and Sophia simultaneously. Because today you've shown us what family really means, what fighting together looks like, what hope sounds like when it comes from the mouth of a child who refuses to give up. Steve turned to address the entire studio again. You know what we're going to do? We're going to finish this game, but first, I want everyone in this studio to understand something. There are thousands of people waiting for organ transplants, and there are thousands of families like the Thompsons holding on to hope while time runs out. As the show concluded, Steve made an unprecedented announcement. He would use his platform to raise awareness about organ donation, encouraging viewers to become registered donors. The response from the audience was immediate and overwhelming. But the most powerful moment came when Steve addressed the camera directly. If you're watching this and you're not an organ donor, he said, I want you to think about Kevin Thompson waiting for a phone call and Sophia Thompson planning to save her daddy's life. Then I want you to register, because somewhere out there someone is waiting for you to give them a second chance at life. As the episode concluded, something unprecedented happened. Organ donation organizations across the country reported massive spikes in registrations. The Sophia effect, as it came to be known, led to thousands of new potential donors joining registries. The episode that aired 2 months later became one of the most impactful in Family Feud history, not because of dramatic moments or unexpected twists, but because of the profound lesson in love and sacrifice delivered by a father fighting for his life and a daughter determined to save him. The response was overwhelming. The show received over 250,000 messages from viewers, many from families dealing with organ failure and transplant waiting lists. Organ donation organizations reported a 300% increase in registrations. Medical facilities saw increases in living donor inquiries. But perhaps the most powerful response came from other children dealing with seriously ill parents, who found inspiration in Sophia's courage and determination. Steve Harvey said in interviews that Kevin and Sophia's episode changed how he understood both love and courage. "I met a little girl that day who was facing her father's mortality with more strength than most adults could muster," he explained. "But I also met a father who was showing his daughter how to fight with dignity." The jacket Steve gave them hangs in Sophia's room now, next to charts tracking her father's health and information about kidney donation she's collected over the years. But the real change wasn't in what they received that day. It was in what they gave to everyone watching. Kevin Thompson is still waiting for a transplant, still fighting, still drawing strength from his daughter's unwavering determination to save him. Sophia is now 13, still planning to be his donor when she turns 18, still researching, still preparing for the day she can give her father the greatest gift possible. The business card Steve gave them sits framed on their kitchen table, representing the moment when their private struggle became a public inspiration, when their family's love became a call to action for thousands of potential organ donors. Every year on National Organ Donation Day, Sophia posts a photo on social media of herself with her father, along with a simple message: "Still waiting, still hoping, still planning to save my daddy." Register to be a donor. You could save someone's family. The lesson Kevin and Sophia Thompson taught that Tuesday afternoon in Atlanta is profound. Love doesn't just endure through crisis, it transforms crisis into purpose, fear into determination, waiting into action. And sometimes it takes a dying father and a brave 12-year-old to remind a television studio full of adults that the greatest gift we can give isn't money or time or sympathy. Sometimes the greatest gift is literally a piece of ourselves, shared with someone whose second chance at life depends on our willingness to give. Because that's what real love looks like. That's what hope sounds like when it comes from a child's heart. And that's what happens when a game show becomes a platform for saving lives, one registered organ donor at a time.